I think it's impossible to overestimate the importance of Vidal Sassoon.
He's probably one of the greatest, if not the greatest, hairdresser who's ever lived.
With raw talent and drive and ambition and just sheer guts, and I will not give up, he built something that rocked the world.
It was one man with an amazing, innovative idea that has stood the test of time.
My next guest became famous for creating the shape, the 5-point, the bob, and the many, many more.
They were the styles which set him off on the path to creating a multi-million-dollar international corporation.
Well, he's an international celebrity, really, who revolutionized the way women of the world look on the outside and how they view themselves on the inside.
Vidal was completely established as the leading person in hair in the world.
Probably the biggest legacy in modern hairdressing is the name Vidal Sassoon.
He's like, I suppose in hair, he's like the Dior of hairdressing.
I think if you went to Japan and asked them, what hairdressers do you know, they would say Vidal Sassoon. They would know the name.
It's like being a boxer in the time of Muhammad Ali, or being a physicist and working next to Einstein, because he was that good.
We think Sassoon, we also think liberation.
He just seemed to exude this magic around him.
If I was the Queen of England, I would knight him.
So much of Sassoon is a myth.
I've worked with some great people in my time, but for me, he is the person. You know, he's the Messiah.
If you don't look good, we don't look good. You know, I'm sitting here reflecting, really, at 81. Who would have dreamt that 67 years ago, at the age of 14, there I was in the East End of London, shampoo boy, and I'm sitting here over 60 years later, and I'm wondering, how did it all happen? How did so much adventure happen?
Transitioned into having product companies. I realized that actually nobody had really recorded his achievements, his life, so I thought a book was absolutely necessary. Felt like it was really important to capture it. He had an impact on the world that no hairdressers ever had. He changed the way women looked. This was the way books used to be produced in magazines. You put them on the floor or the wall. You know, you did a layout. I think he'll really be moved to see this. There were a series of 3-4 hour interviews, different places, different times. The first place we interviewed him was in his house in Beverly Hills. So you were born 1928 in Shepherd's Bush?
When I was maybe 2.5, 3, my mother was evicted. You have to remember, it was 1928 I was born, so in 31, the Depression was on. My father had left us. I had a young brother. And unlike today, where we're multicultural, being Jewish, we stood out in those days. We needed somewhere to live, so she appealed to the Jewish authorities to take us into this orphanage here. And I spent from 5 to 11 in the orphanage and sang in the synagogue choir. "72 years ago, this is where I used to sit. I was a choir boy. The choir master, he'd wrap my knuckles on occasion. Because, you know, we were kids and we were naughty at times. But they were charming services. They were very warm, very gentle. Right now, at this moment, I don't know if I did then. I was far too young, but right now I'm feeling rather spiritual. There's a sense of peace here, and it's a wonderful shaped synagogue. It hasn't changed. I can't think of anything that's changed. I'll give you just a few bars of something that we used to sing. We used to go, hallelujah, hallelujah. And the tune was, hallelujah, 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 Bilkiam Zo. What I miss most is my mom. They only allowed me to see her once a month. I ran away from the orphanage, went to my dad. It was so much closer than the East End where my mother lived. He got me back to the orphanage as quick as he could. And I could see that there was no caring or love. I could tell that as he walked away, when he passed me over to the authorities, that he already had something else on his mind. He didn't even look at me. And I think that moment is when I lost any love that I had for him. Never saw him again.
You see, I had two beautiful sons, and I always had that feeling that I wanted my sons to grow up to be very proud of their mother. And I think that helped me an awful lot.
If there's anything you would wish for me in the future, what would it be?
Oh, God, and this is the truth. I wish happiness in your life because you deserve it, son. If anybody deserves it, you do, because you've been to me. Please, it's the truth, the best son a mother could ever have, and I think I am blessed by God to have such a son.
Her life was a painful one. Mine was different. I knew nothing else, the orphanage. And then the war broke out.
We shall go on to the end. We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and oceans.
And then suddenly we were all picked up, all the kids of London, and sent to the country, where we lived with cows and sheep for the next few years. And of course, very nice people that took us in. We came back to London at 14, and the war was still on, and you were sleeping down the shelter, as everybody did. And the Luftwaffe was rearranging the streets of London every night. The architecture was changing at every moment.
We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be.
I'd had a job at a glove cutter. I was cutting the little snippets that they would sew the gloves together with. I seemed to always have a pair of shears in my hand, except for 3 months in London. They needed messenger boys who had bikes to take messages from the city to the dogs. My mother had remarried Nathan Goldberg, great guy. He got me a bike, and I got the job. The job was fascinating because the streets were blocked and buildings were down, and And I was riding this bike at 14. You're having fun. You know, you began to feel like a war hero.
And in the streets, we shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender.
My mother, she was always concerned, son, you've got to learn a trade.
She said, well, I've had a premonition. What's that, Mother? She said, you're going to be a hairdresser. I said, I'm going to be what? She said, a hairdresser.
So she walked me by the hand into a man called Adolf Cohen in Whitechapel Road. Now, Whitechapel is the heart of the ghetto. And there was this wonderful little man. He couldn't have been more than 5 feet.
He asked for 100 guineas. Now, that was 100 pounds and 100 shillings in those days, which was an impossible figure. My mother said, we don't have 100 buttons. I was kind of smiling because I was relieved. I wasn't going to be a hairdresser. So I went to the door and opened it for my mother and ushered her through. And I doffed the cap. He followed us out. He said, you seem to have rather good manners, young man. Start Monday. And he looked at my mum and said, let's forget the fee. So my apprenticeship cost nothing.
Gay lady, Mayfair in the morning, hear your footsteps echo in the empty street.
I was apprenticed for 2 years with Adolf. Extraordinary man. Pressed trousers every morning, clean nails, clean shoes. Middle of a war. How was that possible? He was a disciplinarian. And I think that had an enormous effect on my sense of how we should progress in our craft.
They can't help, even at 80 years of age, be mesmerised by him. And he's such a well-read man. He really does know a lot of things. He has studied strongly. He's self-educated. I mean, let's face it, he started at 14 at Adolf Cohen's, you know what I mean? He's completely and utterly probably one of the greatest examples, particularly in our business, of a self-made man who's just made it big.
Got to remember, I lived in times where there was a lot of evil intent, you know, with fascism and being a Jewish kid and getting into all kinds of problems in that area.
We'd seen the films of Buchenwald, Auschwitz, you know, and in Treblinka they found 60,000 pair of children's shoes, but no children. Mosley came out of jail with all the fascists and they started putting on their uniforms again, doing exactly the same thing. And there's no way you could deal with them on an intellectual level or go out and speak your mind. It was street fighting. And a group of ex-servicemen started an anti-fascist group, and I swear within a year the streets were cleaned of fascists.
Youngsters like myself, we joined, and we were given all the information, where they would be, where they'd have their meetings. We'd do some damage.
Then the Mosleyites move into London to hold a rally in Dalston, scene of many Mosley riots in pre-war days.
There was always this sense of having to prove something to myself. It was a very personal thing. Oh, I once came to work bruised on one side. Someone had hit me with a ring. As I walked in, a client said, "Good God, what happened to your face?" I said, "Oh, nothing, madam. I just tripped over a hairpin." After the Holocaust, you couldn't just sit at home and allow these thugs be running around London screaming, "We've got to get rid of the Yids." They already got rid of 6 million.
In May of 1948, a new Jewish state, Israel, was born in a bath of blood. Jewish troops routed Arab forces from the city of Haifa in the first of a series of battles that were to reverberate through the years.
I found the concept of going to Israel so fascinating that I put my name down and spent probably one of the great years of my life. I found myself there as a human being. I mean, I didn't think of the great tragedy of war. I just thought as a kid it was an adventure. It became a state May 48. I didn't get there till July.
We were in the Palmach, which was a forward unit. There were some tough times when comrades were either killed or wounded. It was a fascinating experience being with those people and sharing what I shared there.
Before I went to Israel, I really didn't know who I was. As a Jew, you're a minority in every European country. It was the first time that I could truly say I found a sense of dignity as a human being.
It's a very spiritual happening, being in the desert. And the desert has a way of making you bend to its will. Looking up at the stars at night, you often wondered, what are you going to do with your life? I mean, the only thing that I knew how to do was hairdressing. And at that time, I wasn't very, very good at that. If I had to be in hairdressing, because I had no other way of earning a living, the craft would have to change, or I would.
Well, this is just an example to see how high we're
Yeah.
going.
Yeah.
We can post it, so let's just get our line.
Yeah, let's get the first one.
Well, he came back from Israel and went to study at the then best hairdresser, or the most famous hairdresser in London. His name was Raymond, known affectionately as Teasy Weezy. He'd been there to fight, and he came back to fight again. He was fighting against what the establishment was, and despite the fact that it was him against the world, he was determined to do it. He wanted to change hairdressing. Everything was changing. Hair had to change. He just happened to be the person that was obsessed by it. So it was, in fact, his own war.
No mention of art could be complete without reference to the age-old study of beauty culture and the name that has become synonymous with the grooming of beautiful women, hairstylist Raymond.
Well, he was more than a character. He had no shame. He would do things that were so outrageous. Now, he once rode down the course at Ascot during Ascot Week in a pink morning suit. Of course, it was in all the newspapers, you know. I mean, he did things like that.
Well, I'm wearing what I call conservative blue, and it's a Regency style. I think men have been in mourning since the death of Prince Albert. Through the years, they've been drab, and they have been, as what I would term, the butterfly, as it were, coming out of the chrysalis amongst the cabbages.
Marvelous man, and he had a small pair of scissors, and he pruned the hair, he shaped it, he angled the hair, and he got some lovely, lovely work. I mean, he'd come in with those scissors, that moustache, the hair, the whole bit. I mean, when he walked into the salon, nobody looked at anybody else. It was just pure charisma. And what he could do with a pair of scissors was tremendous. He taught me how to cut hair. Just a pair of scissors. No thinning shears, no razors. Just a pair of scissors. Then I had to put the geometry to it. That was later.
There was this change happening, and Vidal was doing things that they weren't doing. Raymond was cutting sharp, but I think after Vidal came out of Raymond and went to Bond Street, he was cutting even sharper.
Hair is nature's biggest compliment, and the treatment of this compliment is in our hands. As in haute couture, the cut is the most important element in deciding line. Haircutting simply means design, and this feeling for design must come from within.
You know, when I started my own it was a small business, in Bond Street, 108 New Bond Street in 1954, it was 700 square feet. And the first day we had about 3 clients. It was, you know, it grew very, very slowly. But I made up my mind then that if I was going to be in hairdressing long term, I wanted to change things. I didn't have a picture of what hair should be, but I had a definite picture of what hair shouldn't be.
There were 8 people in the whole company at that time. The type of work that people know us for did not exist. At that time, we were doing more, I would term, more traditional side of hairdressing. You set hair, you teased it, and you put it in place, and if it didn't stay for a week, you were in big trouble.
In the 54, he was really starting to experiment and look for where his direction was going. Some days, if the cut wasn't going right, he'd throw the brush and comb up in the air, he'd leave the building, and we wouldn't see him again.
He was crazy, actually. He was crazy when clients would touch their hair, whether they would touch it and say, oh, that looks nice, but before they could get that looks nice out, Vidal would smash them on the knuckles with a comb. So when a client got a rap on the knuckles, it was a rap on the knuckles.
I was a naughty boy. When I was frustrated about the work, actually did once throw my scissors in the air and they stuck in the ceiling. So I took it as an omen and went to Paris for 2 weeks, but then came back. But that's the only time I did that. Other times, I'd throw the brush down and go for a walk, come back half an hour later, having given myself a good talking to. And for me, being above it was being the best I could at what I did. And when it wasn't going well, it was frustrating. There were times at the end of the day when it wasn't a good day, and I had no one to turn to because we were trying to do something totally different. And I'd sit at the end of the day very often listening to Miles Davis' Kind of Blue or Mahler's Eighth. And sit alone and ponder, how do you change something? But when you found something, suddenly, I don't know, you lit up like a beacon. There was a sense of, this is new. This is going to be special. We were drawing the attention of people that wanted to see, who is this guy who refuses the back comb? And he won't even do what we ask him to do. He tells you he's going to do what he thinks is good for you. I didn't want to do hairdressing the way it was done. I just didn't want to do it, and I wouldn't. If I couldn't change things from hairdressing to what I considered would be a different form of art. See, hairdressing was an art form. I mean, people like Alexander or Raymond, they're superb, Guillaume, wonderful work. And there's wonderful work being done in London. But when I looked at the architecture, the structure of buildings that were going up worldwide, and you saw a whole different look in shape, my sense was hairdressing definitely needed to be changing. Great architects was where I came from. That was my inspiration, the Bauhaus architecture. For me, hair meant geometry, angles of bone structure, cutting, uneven shapes, as long as it suited that face and that bone structure. So it meant, in essence, getting away from the old-fashioned, I say old-fashioned, but very pretty. I can't knock it. It was beautiful hairdressing, but it wasn't for me. I wanted to eliminate the superfluous and get down to the basic angles of cut and shape. It took 9 years, 54 to 63. It took 9 years. And they were probably the most exciting 9 years of my creative life. And I don't know how we got there. because there were many lonely down times when I'd sit in my flat and think, I'm wasting my time.
Elaine, his first wife, ran the desk and was absolutely incredible and wonderful.
Elaine, what a darling. I was 28, she was 21. It was the most important thing in my life, in a sense. Not the salon itself, the work. It was the most important thing in my life. I was so busy with my work that she fell in love with a ski instructor because I used to water ski. And in the final analysis, I felt it was much better for 2 people to be happy than 3 unhappy.
He recreated himself. He wanted to be a success. He tried to get into Raymond a few times. He walked in with his Cockney accent, and the imperial-looking receptionist looked down at him and said, "Son, you better go and learn how to speak English first." I mean, can you imagine what it feels like to be turned away because you cannot speak your language properly? I mean, you take that as a slap in the face, or as he did, oh, I see, I need to go and learn English. So he did.
He was an ordinary person coming from very humble beginnings.
But you've cut off a lot of other things. You have no Cockney accent. You wouldn't know from just looking at you, the way you dress, the friends you have, that you ever came from the lane or anywhere there. Did you work at it?
There was a lot of work to be done. You leave school at 14. Hello, darling, you're talking a bit like that. Then you've got all that Cockney stuff going, a bit under the arm and all that.
When I tried to get a job with a Cockney accent when I was a kid, nobody would employ me in Mayfair. And people used to say, well, take elocution classes.
Did you?
Of course I did.
I went to Iris Warren, and she said, I work with actors, not hairdressers. I said, well, all right, thank you. She said, no, be at the Old Vic on Thursday at 2 o'clock. I turned up at the Old Vic. She said, up on the stage, you see something there that you can read on a podium? I said, yes. She said, enunciate. Just the one word. And there was something for me to read. So I enunciated. And she said, my God, it's bloody awful, but I think I can do something with you. So for 3 years, when I was in town, wasn't out doing shows. I was going to Iris Warren. She was working on the vowels. And it does work, it does help. And it wasn't just the production of voice, it was when to keep it low, when to bring the audience in, and when to motivate your audience. It was totally fascinating. It gave me the sense, anyway, that I could speak to a crowd of people and bring them into what I was saying and have them understand. And it's proved incredibly valuable. Had I gone to college, I would have definitely been an architect. That would have been my dream, to be an architect. 1954, we were in the very small salon. I was 26 then. And after 2 years, it became far too small. It was a walk-up on the 3rd floor, literally. Then we moved to a much larger salon in Bond Street, posh end, as they'd say. First, we did a white salon with a black boutique. And then later, he turned the whole salon into brown with just steel bars in the front. Didn't look like a hairdressing salon. Looked like a modern art gallery. As we were changing everything, let's change salons as well. So we changed the look of the salon.
There were these fabulous photographs on the wall as a collection of photographs. The tables were very modern. Everything was modern, it was open. You could see from the street into the salon. Now, in those days, that was very unusual. That people would actually be seen getting their hair done was a revolution.
And people were walking around with a sort of a buzz, a click, and it sort of created a sort of excitement.
And then there was a mezzanine floor with all these women standing, hundreds of people were in there. It was very difficult even to get to the receptionist because there was just so many people in the shop.
There was a hush in the salon. You hear the snapping of scissors, you hear not much chat going on. It wasn't like a heavy, gossipy place. It was like quite intense.
In his glossy salons, boys fresh from Streatham and the suburbs give their long-suffering customers not what they want, but what Vidal Sassoon believes they should have. You're not going to cut my hair forward, are you?
Well, Linda, when you came in, I noticed that your hair was curled back.
Yes, I
this
like it
way.
to go back. It's more flattering. I'd rather it went back from there.
Why do you want it to go back? Give me one good
It
reason.
gives me height up there.
So all you're worried about is height, really?
Yes.
Not the fact that it goes back or forward,
Yes,
but
but I've
height.
always had it going back there because it...
We don't go for what you've always had. Listen to me one moment. When you came in, because your hair was curled back and grows forward, what you were getting here was a part. But it was an unintentional part. My feeling is that if your hair is shaped the way it grows, now listen, if it's shaped the way it grows and you have your height put into it, right across the head, you're going to get a much more defined and better shape. You'll get all the height you need, and the shape of the head will actually look better. Try this way.
All right.
What I'm going to do is cut it in a way that if you feel you'd still like it to come back, you can take it back.
Vidal would walk in the salon and everyone would be working. And there would be quite a buzz going on, but he'd walk in and suddenly there'd be a bit of a hush until he got his first client in the chair and his assistant was there with his scissors and his combs, and then the tempo would pick back up again as he got going. He said, all right, he's in, he's settled, he's crimping, we're in, we're on again.
Do you always insist on giving people what you think's right rather than what they ask for?
Well, the work is technical, but on the other hand, it is instinctive as well. And if your instincts tell you that what you're doing is wrong, then you mustn't do it because you're going to make a bad job of it. I think that makes sense in anything.
It takes a long time to grow out. Surely if somebody complains, you're really in trouble.
That's true. I mean, I think that people that try to do something a little different more often go out on a limb. If you're not trying to be safe all the time, on the other hand, you're going to be more progressive and get more done. I think it works that way.
His creativity was at epic level. It was just everything he did, every section he took, he was like a piece of art in motion.
It's like listening to music or, you know, having a great meal, you know, or seeing Vidal work.
There was something magic about what Vidal was, because he would dance.
Most people, when they cut hair, they cut with this comb and scissors. Vidal cut with his whole body.
He would move, he would sweat, he would make faces. He would cut hair and it would snip, 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 snip.
Vidal was in his patent leather slippers with his tight trousers. He was dancing around the chair. He was pulling faces.
Do you have one particular kind of style that you put over every year? Or is it just anything that suits anybody?
Well, that's a difficult one to answer. I think each year we try to bring out something, we try to innovate something a little different.
Yes, this is all right for somebody my age or older, but what happens to someone 20 years older? It can't work for everyone.
You'd be amazed how with every line, whether it be hair or clothes, a client will take something from it. There's always something that they can take from it, even if they don't have the actual line.
There must be an awful lot of mutton turned out as lamb from here in that case.
I'm going to let you stew in that one. I'm not going to answer it.
I hope you're not snipping too much up in revenge.
Vidal made everybody nervous, especially me. I would feel instantly sweat coming all over me, and your hands would start shaking.
We were told never to call the clients madam, always to call the clients madame. We were told to open the door for the client. We were told to get the taxi for the client. We were told to get the lunch for the client.
He would not tolerate anything that wasn't up to scratch. If you didn't look the part, that's it. You went. You were out at the door. And if you hadn't cleaned your shoes that day, boy, that's it. You were out. You weren't there. You were just out the door.
And there I was doing this haircut, and I'm pulling the hair out, and I could feel him behind. And not only could I feel him behind, but I could hear him going, snip, snip, snip. As I was cutting, he was going snip, 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 snip. And it was freaking me out.
I remember one time he sent me home because my shoes were not polished. He says, you know, he was very strict. Every time I assisted him, if I got distracted for a second, he would take his comb and he would snap my hand and said, put attention.
Well, for Vidal to check your haircut was the end of life, because you knew he was going to find something wrong with it, because nobody could do a haircut to the perfection of Vidal. So he would pick the hair up and he'd go over this haircut and he'd say, you've got to get it right, and you've got to pull that hair, you've got to put tension on the hair, move your body, cut it again.
But you know, the thing is, you knew when he was tough, when his voice lowered. He had this kind of whispering thing, and he'd say, I don't think you are right for here. You don't seem to understand it. So I suggest you go that way and don't come back again. But the minute that voice lowered, you knew that was it.
I knew we were getting there. We weren't there, but we were getting there. I got a call from the film production company, would I cut Nancy Kwan's hair? And she just made a great film with William Holden, which was a big success. She came in, gorgeous girl, with 4 feet of hair down her back. Her producer, her manager, there was a whole team. We took over the 2nd floor, and I started to carve into this head of hair. And I saw that by bringing the back up slightly and keeping the length at the sides, not 4 feet, but keeping length at the sides, you get a great angle from the side. And she could shake it and it would fall in. Well, she was petrified. She played chess with her manager while all this was, she couldn't look. And I'm seeing something. And I said to my assistant, I said, would you please get Terence Donovan on the phone? So Terry gets on the line. I said, Terry, I think we got something. I'm working on Nancy Kwan now. I'd like to bring her in this evening. Can we work tonight? He said yes. And the architectural sense of what we were doing, making a statement, that's what mattered, making a statement. And he got it off perfectly. I mean, that picture went from American Vogue to English Vogue to Italian Vogue. It went first to all the Vogues, then the papers picked it up. I knew then we were onto something.
I think the 5-point, it was probably the most famous haircut, the most photographed. The model in the 5-point haircut is Grace Coddington, who went on to become creative director at American Vogue and has been for a long time.
At the time I had hair a little bit longer than it is now. Vidal was like super smooth and he had this gentle voice, and he sort of sat me down, and I guess he liked my hair because he started cutting it. And
well, there were great joyful moments, especially, you know, when the 5-point cut really worked. And Claire Rendlesham gave it the whole middle of Queen, 2 pages, boom, chomp. And those exciting moments, but the lead up to it could be terribly frustrating. 5-point cut for me was the epitome of 9 years of work that led up to it. It was the last cut of geometry that, in essence, covered the whole head, because you had to create the points here, depending on bone structure, where it was on the individual character you're working on. And use the center point in the back of the head and the 2 at the side. You actually had 5 points.
And then I remember feeling the back and feeling that, you know, it's cut right up into the hairline. That was pretty revolutionary. And it's kind of finished, and he said, stand up, okay, shake it, and it, you know, and it was extraordinary.
Now the thing about it was that the hair itself, when it was brushed anyway, or you put your fingers through it, had to fall back perfectly. 5-point cut was the essential geometric shape.
he gave me the opportunity. I mean, he put me there, you know. There was him and Mary Quant too, and they're kind of synonymous really with that moment. You know, I think the miniskirt is very connected to Vidal and how he saw hair.
Mary Quant was credited with creating the miniskirt, and this prolific outpouring of designs. The interesting thing about Mary and Vidal was that they collaborated. She was walking down Bond Street and she happened to look at her little window and there was a photograph in it of a hairstyle and she loved it. She went upstairs with her husband. She said, I knew then and there that I wanted him to cut my hair.
You came in 1957 with Alexander. Well, he was one of the great characters, Plunkett Green. He was marvellous.
He was.
He really was, a personality, superb. And I don't know why, it wasn't a custom of mine, but it was the first time I cut your hair. And I cut your ear.
And you had all your staff watching.
And
you
blood
cut
was
the lobe of my ear, it was blood flying everywhere. And you were pretending you hadn't,
nothing happened.
that you hadn't done it. You were gabbing away.
I loved it.
It was
And Alexander said, oh, do you charge extra for that? You know? The Times newspaper brought out an article with 9 pictures of how Mary Quant changed the 60s. And I was fortunate enough to be there to, shall I say, help you do it, Mary?
And Vidal Sassoon changed hair forever.
You put the top on it.
I can remember, it wasn't just your atelier in the King's Road, the whole King's Road was your atelier. Do you remember at one time?
The King's Road was a catwalk, wasn't
it was wonderful.
And there'd be sort of Time magazine on one side, Elle magazine on the other. And the photographers were actually photographing each other across the road in the middle of all that excitement. Yeah.
But in the 60s, there was a mingling.
Yes.
There wasn't just the film celeb. Everybody had come to London to be creative, whether they were actors, photographers,
That's right.
you know, whatever, the writers. So London became that marvelous melting pot
of everything from everywhere.
A young woman has changed the dress ideas, the outlook on clothes of the new generation throughout the Western world, Mary Quant. The artist in her sensed that millions of young girls longed for something entirely different. Being one of them, so did she.
Everything changed.
Everything changed.
The power, the meritocracy was youth.
Yeah.
Youth, creativity, excitement.
They called it Youthquake.
Yeah. Yeah. And you were the head of the Youth Quake, my love.
This is the modern world. This is the modern world. What kind of fool you think I am? You think I know nothing about the modern world? All my life has been the same. I've learned to live by hating pain. It's my inspiration drive. I've learned more than you'll ever know. Even in school I feel quite sure that one day I will be on top, and I'd look down upon the man. The teachers who said I'd be nothing. Yeah, this is the modern world that I've learned about. This is the modern world. This is the modern world.
We were telling the public, you haven't had this before. It's new. Try it.
It was a bit difficult, if I remember, because in those days, everybody had a great deal of hair. I mean, all the models did. And we had a terrible job persuading these top-earning girls, I mean, the best ones, that it was worth having all that beautiful hair cut off into this extraordinary 5-point shape. By 3 o'clock in the morning, they were unable to work for anybody else ever.
I love this picture.
Oh, that's not closed, though.
No, it's not closed, but I love that.
Peggy Moffat.
Peggy Moffat.
Yeah.
And she was a hell of a girl, wasn't she?
Peggy could, and did, act out every hair look.
Yes.
And if she was wearing your clothes, it would even be more. You wouldn't see her for 10 minutes because she'd be in the mirror doing all kinds of strange moves.
New
dance
moves for a new dress, yes.
And she'd get in front of the camera, and wow.
Yes.
You know, it was magic.
Yes. You see, nobody had cut hair like that. I mean, you cut hair as we cut cloth. You cut it not only on the straight, you also cut it on the cross. And the most exciting clothes are cut on the cross. And you cut hair on the cross. I think that's how you arrived at that amazing diagonal haircut.
The name Sassoon is important because we associate it with an incredible change in culture that was happening in the early 1960s. When you saw somebody dressed in a quant outfit with a fantastic 5-point Sassoon haircut, you didn't know if they were a countess, you didn't know if they were, you know, someone who worked in a shop. That sort of really dramatically changed how people thought about Britain. You know, it was no longer this hide-bound, kind of class-oriented society. And I think also it really changed how women thought about themselves, because women were not only liberated kind of sexually and socially, you know, in the 1960s, they were also liberated through their clothes and very particularly through their haircuts. They were no longer having to go to the salon every week to have their hair permed and set and tweaked and back-combed. They could go into, you know, a wonderful Sassoon salon that was full of incredible energy, and they could have a haircut that they could go out, wash once a week, twice a week, you know, do it all at home, and it would look fantastic.
And then, of course, on Saturday, he would be off to Chelsea in the afternoon, but he'd still be in the business. But he used to physically work absolutely as hard as everybody did on a clientele 4 days a week in those years.
Better than the psychiatrist's couch. Coming to Chelsea on a Saturday afternoon after working with the ladies all week was exactly what I needed. I remember as a kid, I've been coming 65 years. When I was 14, it was the first time I came to Chelsea. And I was standing way back there, because in those days there weren't seats. There was just a few on this side of the ground. As the business grew a little, I got my first season ticket, and you'll never guess what it cost. £8. It was right at the end. Football, in a sense, is a cross between chess and ballet. The players have to have that marvelous finesse as they're playing, as they're moving. Also, the team spirit, because that's what we tried to do in hair, build a great team that eventually went international and did exciting things. You start talking about teams. Pick a football team. We had a man at Chelsea called Zola. He was the engine, and he brought the standard of everybody else's play up. That's all I was the engine. I was the engine that created a team that eventually did such superb work that when I went to New York, they didn't even miss me. They did such good work. They didn't need me. And I think that's the essence of always creating around you talent. I had such an extraordinary team. I mean, there was Roger Thompson, there was Christopher Brooker, there was Joshua Galvin, Trevor Sorby, Leonard. They all made big names for themselves in a way. And this is my team. The whole essence, the excitement of our creativity, and I say our because it's always teamwork. Yes, I led it, but it was our excitement, our creativity was the changes, those marvelous changes. We were on cloud 9.
You started your schools, which I thought was the most generous thing I'd ever heard of.
No.
And you taught them how to cut.
Well, that was the intelligent thing. Look, if you just do something, Mary, and you're a 5-year wonder, and goodbye, you're gone. But if people feel it's worthwhile, not only do they copy, but they want to learn how to do it.
Yes.
So then you open an academy.
Yeah.
And they come in from many different countries. You learn
And
about
particularly Japan and the Far East.
Far East, but also from all over Europe, Africa.
Everywhere.
Yeah, from everywhere. And suddenly you're opening more and more academies and you're teaching your methods. To me, that's what it was all about. If someone would say, what was the number one thing, in essence, that you left behind? It was the teaching of others so that they could take your work and take it further.
So the word was spreading out there amongst the hairdressers that this was revolutionary.
The energy emanating from that place was quite extraordinary, and that led to the sense of being international. Once we opened the school, and we had all these people coming in from Japan, Germany, you name it. And then, of course, New York happened, and I came to America.
Cool town, living in the city, dressed so fine and looking so pretty. Cool cat, looking for a kitty, gonna look in every corner of the city. Till I'm wheezing like a bus stop, running up the stairs, gonna meet you on the rooftop. But at night it's a different world, go out and find a girl. Come on, and dance on.
New York, Pierre Hotel. Crimpers had come in from everywhere, different countries. And I got these three girls and worked on them the day before and cut the hair and got the shapes as I wanted them. Sunday, the press turned up. The press don't turn up on Sunday. The press turned up. And they were taking pictures like crazy. The following day, there were 5 newspapers in New York. We hit the front page of their beauty page. It was wild. And suddenly, there we were in New York City, with a great salon on Madison Avenue.
Hot town, summer in the city, back of my neck getting dirt and gritty. Been down, isn't it a pity? Doesn't seem to be a shadow in the city.
Lived in New York for 10 years. Lovely, traveled with just a briefcase because we had a little pad in London, little apartment, and a little one in New York. So I was going back and forth.
My life at the moment is so much on the move, which I find very exciting. After I've been, say, 2 months in London working, I get the urge to see how we're doing in New York, and I go over there and do some more work. So if you ask me would I like to live in Petticoat Lane, I wouldn't particularly like to live in any one place for too long at this point.
What happened in America was we were the Beatles. We were the hairdressing Beatles on Madison Avenue.
And then he took this team over to New York, which was revolutionary in New York at that time because, God bless them, you know, the Americans were a little bit behind with the hairdressing styles, but they were around the world. They hadn't caught up yet. And that team, all looking like Beatles and mini skirts on the girls up to here and all that sort of thing, really was, you know, it was the word on the street.
It just happened that round about the 60s, most of our guys were heterosexual. And I had to have staff meetings because I said, listen, fellas, we're professionals. You've got to stop sleeping with the clients. I mean, you've got to remember it was the days of extraordinary sexual freedoms. I mean, penicillin cured everything.
Was the wildest salon. All the hairdressers were really, they were all pretty hot, kind of like the movie Shampoo, you know. It was all hands everywhere. Vidal had beautiful girlfriends, always, I remember, and they always had, of course, gorgeous hair.
It was a marvelous time.
Vidal had become a major celebrity. He was on talk shows. He did Mike Douglas. He was on the Today Show. He was on the Tonight Show. He was the mystery guest on What's My Line.
Right now, let's meet our first contestant. Will you enter and sign in, please? Mr. X. And we'll let the audience in the theater and the audience at home know exactly what your name is and what your line is.
Do you represent men's fashions in England? Do you have anything to do with handling fabrics?
Mr. X, do you have anything to do with hair?
Yeah.
Oh, it's Sassoon!
Yeah, that's right. Actually, I came here this time not particularly to work, but to marry an American girl. Ah.
We moved probably this summer of '68. We were going back and forth for some time, but this was about a year and a half after we got married that we moved to New York, and then Katya, our daughter, was born in 1968. All the kids were born in New York. We lived in a little apartment, so it was an interesting time. Vidal was he was a good dad. You know, he used to come home in the middle of the day and he'd pick up one of the kids and take them on his shoulders to Central Park, you know, and he was very much involved with being a father.
I was in New York till I was 3 years old, and you know, he used to take me and my older sister out and throw me on his shoulders and run around the city. I think that's one of my first memories.
Handsome-looking guy, slim, health fanatic, a keep fit superhero.
A hairdresser's life is not all frills, perfume, and half a crown slipped into a tight back pocket. In Vidal Sassoon's world, the next best thing to a well-cut head is a well-built body.
Always took time out to look after yourself. Always. If your body is not right, your mind will react. If your mind isn't right, your body's going to react. So you have to work essentially on developing the mind, if you can. And the only thing I regret not having is 4 years at a great college to expand the mind so it would take in so much more. But physically, I was always swimming. I was make sure I worked out, took massage, and it worked for me because I could work 14 hours a day. I think in any industry or craft, art, you need to spend more time at it if you want to become good than the average. It's not a 9 to 5 thing. It could be a 14-hour day by the time you finish with your models and what have you, and then you've got to work the following day. I was very careful with the food. I exercised, always have. So it's important to stretch the back out as far as you can. Stretch it out, stretch it out, stretch it out. It's a wonderful feeling. It's to have the agility, not quite of your youth, obviously, but nevertheless have the agility to move like a younger person. And I love this. I think this stretching is marvelous. I started doing Pilates about 25 years ago, and some of these stretches come from Pilates. The whole thing about this is fascinating, Regis, because in California now, the orthopedic hospital are taking it to work with children, using this to work with children who have muscular diseases. So it's remedial, dancers, it's very effective for everybody.
Oh, I can't wait for you to demonstrate it. Here we go. Like this.
Yeah.
And like that.
Yeah. Now take the springs.
Now, what were you looking at?
The ceiling. The ceiling, Regis.
Yeah.
There you go. Now come back. Now you should be sitting further forward. There we go. Now lie back. Now bring yourself up and bring your legs up. Now bring your body up.
Isn't there an easier way to take a workout?
When I was overtired, as one would become, I go to places like Grayshot Hall and hang out there for 10 days and do the full treatment. I met some incredible characters there. And who was there but Gore Vidal? Monday morning, you're down there for your treatment at 8 o'clock, and they said, Mr. Vidal, your treatment's ready. So I wander in, I take my treatment, and I hear this voice saying, are you always running late? When they sorted out what was going on, they found out that I was having Gore Vidal's enema. Essentially, knowing your body is having the feel of the balance of your body. Bring your legs up, get them out straight, bring them in, out, one leg out, and here we go again.
How old are you?
55.
Not bad, is it?
In Bond Street, before we came over, I mean, after hours, some of the boys had come downstairs. You know, you'd have Peter O'Toole to drop in for a haircut, you know. When Roman Polanski was in town, he'd come in for a haircut.
Polanski was doing a movie in London with this Catherine Deneuve. Roman said, I'd want to use the balcony of your salon. He said, I just need it for the weekend. Well, he stayed 5 days. The clients loved it. There was Catherine Deneuve being filmed on the balcony, and there we were working down here with our clients. And of course, it was exciting. They found it fascinating. And I guess he felt he owed me one. Because about 6 months later, he calls me and said, hey, would you like to come do Mia Farrow's hair for Rosemary's Baby? It was quite a scene, that whole haircut. Paramount lot, stage 13. They put up a boxing ring. I lead her from her dressing room to the boxing ring. Before we knew what was happening, I was cutting her hair. The press crawled into the boxing ring. There was one guy under the chair photographing up. They were all over the place. Roman was in there. Suddenly, Mia looks at the press and says, what are you all doing here photographing a haircut while the indigenous Americans are suffering? This sort of political thing was going on. And I'm cutting their hair. I said, this is absolutely crazy. It went into the movie.
My God.
It's Vidal Sassoon. It's very in.
What's wrong with you?
Do I look that bad?
Terrible.
It was nutty, absolutely nutty. It was Hollywood. There was no question about it. It would not have happened that way anywhere else. I guess what it did, it brought the name to Middle America. But there's always, can I improve on it? Or what am I going to do next?
I'm immediately attracted and fascinated by marvelous hair and the people that wear it. We call it sassooning. I'm Vidal Sassoon. And if you don't look good, we don't look good.
Vidal said, you know, I want to figure out a way to earn a living while other people are sleeping. The obvious was products.
Quite simply, we feel there are 4 steps to beautiful hair.
I met a man called Don Sullivan, and we talked about developing a product company. Totally simple, totally different. I was as excited about the packaging as I was about the product.
But it changed an industry, his way of working and his way of thinking.
If we think of all those hairdressers who are bringing out products today, you have to remember that he was really the first. You know, he had this worldwide billion-dollar product enterprise, which again in itself is very far-seeing.
The salons were growing, the schools were growing, England was growing, Europe was growing.
Our biggest success was in Japan, China. They loved it. They absolutely loved it.
It's really great to look your best. More beautiful each day. With silky, sexy,
shiny hair.
The Vidal Sassoon way. 'Cause if you don't look good, we don't look good. We take pride in you. If you don't look good, we don't look good. Vidal Sassoon.
It seems like it happened overnight, but it didn't. It took so long to get the products off the ground and to build a company. We eventually moved from New York to California, and we thought maybe it would be an easier lifestyle for the kids. I was concerned about it because I grew up here, and I've seen a lot of marriages go under. And I don't know if you can blame Los Angeles, but I had a fear.
Went very swimmingly for a while. We were doing things that were quite extraordinary. I mean, we had a best-selling book, A Year of Beauty and Health. It was #3 in the country. The book was one of the first of its kind. Beverly was terrific with yoga, and there's some marvelous pictures of her doing yoga. Of course, I was always into exercise. We were very much into the foods that kept us healthy and our lifestyle. We portrayed that in a book. People seemed to like it. People wanted to buy it. It actually sold 300,000 copies in the first year. And in 18 months, 400,000 copies were sold, which is pretty extraordinary for a health book.
They're going to co-host a whole show on beauty and health today. Here are two people whose life together makes them truly beautiful people, Vidal and Beverly Sassoon. Welcome them, please.
She was excellent on television. And when we worked the country with the book, she was pretty terrific. She really knew her stuff.
There was a television station that was putting together a week of TV programming. And every night, they would have a different couple.
Wednesday is Vidal Sassoon and Beverly Sassoon, your host tonight on the Monday through Friday show.
Good evening.
This is going to be a fun evening. I have a great feeling about it. Go ahead, you have to...
What do you think, folks? This is George Hamilton's pajamas.
We enjoyed it. We did many, many episodes. It was very successful.
Your new day. It's your new day.
I was offered a show. I did 200 of them. Had some marvelous guests.
Here he is, the host of Your New Day, Vidal Sassoon.
What's your question?
What is the price of a Vidal Sassoon hairstyle?
A Vidal Sassoon?
Jumping and keeping in shape.
You know I wouldn't miss an opportunity to test this one out. Right, here goes. Oh.
Well, I was going to...
I was having a ball, except I was neglecting what I'd started. The products were going, but there was no one out there promoting them. And I had to make a big decision after 200 shows. I couldn't desert my own company.
Thank you, Vidal. You've changed, Vidal. Thank you, Vidal.
Because you're using more styling products, it's harder to get your hair really clean and sexy. New advanced salon formula.
Thank you, Vidal.
Because if you don't look good, we don't look good.
I think that moving from New York to LA was very good for products, but it wasn't a very good move family-wise.
Winning money today for the Red Section International Style Center. There he is, Mr. Vidal Sassoon, and his wife, Beverly Sassoon.
I think it suddenly struck her, the lack of her own identity. It all became a wee bit too much for her emotionally.
I'm pretty much non-confrontational. I don't like it. If I had learned that then, I'd have been able to maybe deal with some of Vidal's behavior and some of the, what I perceive to be is anger directed towards me. But that's eventually what drove me away.
I think one of the most difficult periods for me personally was the divorce. We had 3 children in New York, adopted David in Los Angeles. Adopting David, he was 3 years old. I think my past had something to do with that. Growing up in an orphanage, it'd be nice, wouldn't it, if you took a young child, joined with our family. The divorce really affected me and affected my judgment. I made certain decisions I may not have made had I not been in the state of mind I was in at the time. I guess had I had it all to do again, I would not have been seduced to sell the product company.
Vidal was absolutely the creator of the celebrity endorsed hair product line. He did not intend for it to go mass, but it did very quickly. It was in such demand that it was uncontrollable, so he went with it rather than against it. He couldn't fight it.
Then a company came along, and I'm not mentioning names here, but a company came along, Richardson Vicks it was actually, and with all kinds of promises about, we're going international, you're our only line, and we'll take over, you know, you'll go out and do shows in different countries, and they really wound me up. And we went with Richardson Vicks. Of course, about a year and a half later, they sold out to Procter & Gamble. So all their fancy stories were at an end. You can't go through life. You cannot. It's impossible to go through life on a fairy tale. Something that just happens and it's all marvelous. It's all marvelous. The downs come and you've got to steel yourself. I think I know, actually, because it happened again this New Year's. I'll never enjoy a New Year's Day. I'll walk away and get lost somewhere and come back on January the 2nd. Because 5 years ago, New Year's Eve, my daughter Katya, my eldest girl, who I absolutely adored, and she was very special to me, she OD'd. And it was the worst moment. They called me New Year's Day and said she passed away that night before, and many parents have gone through this, and they know the feeling. This is a hard one to work through. Yeah.
Realize that a really fabulous shape makes them look and feel great, and it's very easy to take care of. So I think it is, in fact, very modern. It's about design. Sassoon's effect was so far-ranging, the geometry of it, that you would probably have said it was, in fact, the iPod of its day. It was the Apple. It was design, design, design.
Every single hairdresser owes that guy something. It's not just the geometric haircut that we have to thank him for, it's today's hairdressing that we have to thank him for.
Vidal Sassoon is a kind of blueprint to me of sort of modern hairdressing. So the images that I saw when I walked into the salon the first time, the pictures on the wall still are a part of my sort of library.
He's revolutionized not just hair but fashion.
I think it's recognized how important Vidal has been to fashion history. That in itself, the influence of that fashion and that whole persona with the hairdo and the makeup had a huge influence on architecture, design in general, furniture, films, our whole visual world. And here was a hairdresser who has done something incredibly important.
You know, those hairstyles, as iconic as they are, they live on. How amazing that they're so relevant now as they were when they were created.
This started that revolution, and it led into the real revolution, which is letting hair be. Even every straight bob is still done in the spirit of Sassoon.
In all the countries, they want to know about Vidal Sassoon in terms of their hair now. They feel completely comfortable with that over-the-top Peggy Moffat thing that is so Vidal, but they think of it as very now. They don't look back.
The shapes can come and go, but what he gave to women, the way he probably liberated women, is like something that is bigger than just being a hairdresser.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you look lovely, all of you. Some great haircuts, huh? Yeah, it looks fantastic, yeah. Lovely, shake it.
He has the most incredible political conscience of anyone that I've known. He loves the idea of generosity in a community. He loves the idea of giving something back.
We're involved in something truly exciting in New Orleans. I think the soul of America is at risk. There's so many areas where greed has taken over, where mistakes have been made. What's happened in New Orleans is a total disregard for the fundamental human instincts. 275,000 people wiped out. No homes, underwater, wiped out. The government that says we're not in the real estate business. What an outrage. I became so angered at this and said, look, let's get the hairdressing craft behind this.
Well, he's given so much to the hairstylists of the world that Hairdressers Unlocking Hope was a way for them to support him. And with their help, he was able to build 23 houses.
This is not charity. This is the feeling for our fellow citizens who are in need. Philanthropy from an individual point of view, I think is absolutely essential. It also gives you a spiritual awareness that I can't get from religions anymore.
You know, if you read Vidal's life, it would read as if it was quite tough. He took what was presented and used it to motivate himself. Absolutely. He was determined to be great at something. So that's part of his legacy as well. That you can, in fact, grow up in tough times. You can create a path that hasn't been created. You can do something new in any field, and you can help people.
He does ask sometimes if I think that he is a good person. Do you think I'm a good person?
And I've often thought that that comes from his childhood, because I know that children blame themselves when their parents separate. And they tend to blame themselves for everything that happens to them when they're little. And I think somewhere inside of him, he blamed himself for his parents' divorce And he even thought that he had to go to the orphanage because he was a bad boy. And I'm not sure that he's ever completely gotten over that.
I met Ronnie, actually I was 62. And she was a delightful 30-something. Something about her that was even hard to describe. Let's say fascination. Been fascinated ever since. Before I met Ronnie, I'd finished with women. To be with a woman permanently, that was never going to happen. I was far more focused on my kids, my work. She came along and my life changed.
Now his empire stretches across the globe, but what about the romance? Well, there's been plenty of that throughout his glamorous career, but it's only with his present wife, Ronnie, that he believes he's finally found the one.
Ronnie, because of a very good mind and a fascination for new things, has made my life so much more interesting. There's no question about that.
I've made him and his family a home, and he's expanded my horizons. He's shown me more of the world, and he's shown me what one individual can do for the world.
What have you got there?
Well, this is the book.
That's the book?
This is essentially your life on the wall.
I don't know if I want to see it.
Well, you've lived it, so you might as well relive it.
Wow.
It's pretty impressive, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
You get to a certain point in your life and aware that each day is a special day, because you understand there are less of them to come. And I think he's very, very, very aware of that.
Final just 2 summers ago.
They haven't beaten Italy for 88 years.
They haven't?
No. So this is something extraordinary. If they do it. If they do it. Yes! Spain's got it! I'm pleased because they deserved it. How fortuitous to be able to touch the human frame, to be exhilarated by a craft that constantly changes, to hold that substance growing from the human form that molds, creates spontaneous fashion, to be involved in the poetry of change. That was the 60s. So from my point of view, if you bring back the spirit, that sense of purpose and awareness of the 60s, we'd be much better off.
Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Mr. Vidal Sassoon.
You know, I'm sitting here reflecting, really, and I'm wondering, how did it all happen? How did so much adventure happen? You go back all those years, and you think, the excitement, the creativity, the people you've met, the extraordinary sense of loneliness at times. Most of my progressive thoughts in work and attitude have been when I've been alone. I can remember one New Year's at the Lyceum. It was a dance hall. I was upstairs watching from the balcony, all the revelers enjoying themselves. I was looking down upon maybe 1,000 or more people I didn't feel part of the crowd. In my own loneliness, there was always this sense that I wanted to be a winner. But in the final analysis, when all that's been said, my heart was in hair. Always has been, still is. You know, tomorrow's going to be a day that's never happened to me before. Actually going to the palace to receive a CBE from the Queen. The more I think about it, the more I sense that it truly belongs to the craft. It truly belongs to all those people that have helped me so much in the development of our craft. I often say to myself, God, I wish I had a second original idea. I would love to see some young person with an enormous energy create something new, create something different. When everybody tells you, the doubters tell you it can't be done, you know, you'll go broke, or all kinds of tragedies will come your way. Nonsense. If you can get to the root of who you are, the gut of who you are, and make something happen from it in whatever field, my sense is you're going to surprise yourself.
It's wonderful, it's marvelous that you would care for me. It's very nice, it's paradise, it's all I want to see. You made my life so glamorous, don't blame me for feeling amorous. It's wonderful, it's marvelous that you would care for me. It's marvelous that you would care for me. It's very nice, it's paradise, it's all I want to see. You made my life so glamorous, don't blame me for feeling amorous. It's wonderful, it's marvelous that you the phone.